He said he'd pick me up from school today. He said it like a threat, like a nail pressed against skin. I can still hear his voice under the clatter of dishes from last night. You'll walk straight to the car, you'll keep your head down, and if you make a scene, I won't whisper next time. If you're watching this, breathe with me. In, out. Because what happened at the gate, you won't believe what happened at the gate. My name is Mia. I'm 16 and I know the school bell by heart. The exact heat of the metal bars on the front gate at 3:10 p.m. And the way my breath folds into itself when I hear his key at the apartment door. I do my homework at the kitchen table with the chair legs tucked tight so they don't scrape and wake his temper. I count the steps to the bus stop, 22 to the corner, 5 more to the faded crosswalk, because numbers are steady, and steady is the only kind of safe I know. I keep my hood up in the hallway and hide in the sound of lockers, because if nobody sees you, nobody asks the wrong questions. But last night, Ms. Clara stayed late to help me with geometry, tracing triangles in chalk and telling me that proofs are just ways to show that something has to be true. She's the kind of teacher who notices the difference between quiet and silence. She looked at the faint purple shadow on my wrist where a doorframe met me too fast, and she didn't look away. "Are you safe, Mia?" she asked, soft as paper. I said yes the way you say it when the truth has nowhere to go. At home, the air felt wrong. He called me sweetheart and then he called me stupid. He set a bowl down too hard and told me to stop flinching. When Mom got home, her eyes were already apologizing for things she hadn't seen. He walked past me and brushed my shoulder with the back of his hand like you'd brush a bug off a sleeve, and he smiled. "Tomorrow," he said. "I'll pick you up." So I practiced being small. I tried to fold myself into a shape that wouldn't catch the light. I washed the dishes quiet. I double-checked my phone was charged and hidden in my backpack's inner pocket. I slept with my sneakers on. The morning was ordinary on purpose. Toast, bus, spot in the back. I watched the city slide past like a movie I'd seen too many times. Laundromats with stickers peeling on the windows. The bakery with glass cases like treasure chests. The mechanic's shop where the same 3 men sat on overturned buckets and threw their laughter across the sidewalk. When the bus rattled by them, one of the men lifted his chin toward me without smiling. It was a small thing, a plus sign in a subtraction day. First period, second, lunch, everything in grayscale. My friends talked about a party I'd never get to go to. I nodded like I was there. I spent last period counting breaths, pulling them like thread through a needle. In 2-3, out 2-3. The bell rang and my stomach fell through the floor. When I got to the front steps, I stopped. There was a sound coming from the street, low and steady, like thunder rolling over the same patch of sky. Heads turned. A boy beside me pulled off his headphones and said, "What is that?" Before the answer rounded the corner, a long line of motorcycles, shoulder to shoulder, chrome flashing in the afternoon sun. They weren't racing. They weren't snarling. They were arriving 64, I learned later. In that moment, it felt like a moving wall. Black jackets, reflective visors, patches stitched like constellations. The bikes pulled up in front of the school gate, engines rumbling to a single heartbeat. And then, as if one hand reached out and pressed a universal switch, every engine went quiet. Silence. Not empty, not hollow. A silence with weight, with intention. The kind that lands on your shoulders and says, "You're not alone." Kids around me whispered. Someone filmed. The security guard's radio crackled against his chest. Across the street, a car idled. My stepfather's car. He leaned an elbow on the open window like he owned the sidewalk. Sunglasses, half smile. The kind of confidence that comes from getting away with things for a long time. He lifted his chin at me. "Let's go," he mouthed. It wasn't a request. A rider at the center of the line took off his helmet. He was older than my teachers and younger than my grandfather, with gray at his temples and eyes that looked like they'd seen every kind of weather. He stepped forward. He didn't look at my stepfather's car. He looked at me. "Mia?" he asked, and hearing my name said like that, like a password that unlocks a real person, almost undid me. I nodded because my voice had forgotten how to do anything but hide. He glanced at the gate, at the swirling knot of students, at the phone cameras catching everything. "We're here if you want us to be," he said. "If you want us to leave, say the word. Your call." I felt the ground under my sneakers, real and solid. I felt Miss Clara's hand hover near my elbow without touching. I felt the eyes on me, not the way you feel when you're a spectacle, but the way you feel when witnesses turn into mirrors and show you the shape of your fear. I looked across the street at the idling car. I thought of last night's promise like a knife tucked behind his tongue. "I don't want to go with him," I said. My voice was small and it still cut the afternoon clean in half. The leader nodded once. He tapped the side of his helmet. Phones lifted in a ripple, microphones of another kind. "Heard you," he said. Then he turned to the line and made a small circular motion with his hand. They didn't move forward. They didn't shout. They did something louder. One by one, helmets came off. Faces appeared. Men and women. Old scars and new smiles. Patches that read things like community and brother and sister. Someone's vest said dad's on duty. Someone else's said auntie squad. And then, because the world likes symmetry, one of them took off her helmet, and I saw Ms. Clara's sister, a woman I'd met once at parent night, the one who'd stood in the corner with arms that looked like she could lift a car. My stepfather stepped out of the idling car, every motion calculating the distance between what he could get away with and who was watching. "What is this?" he asked the street, loud enough to play for a crowd. "Some kind of circus?" "No," the leader said, still calm. "It's a line. A line for what?" "For Mia." He said my name like a boundary. For anyone who thinks a closed door is a good place to keep secrets. People across the street had their phones up. The security guard stood 2 steps back from the gate, eyes forward, radio live. Mrs. Clara spoke, almost under her breath, but into every microphone recording. "I filed a report," she said. "I spoke to the counselor, to the officer who does outreach. You don't get to make pickup lines into threats." My stepfather smiled the way you smile when you believe in your own magic. "She's my responsibility," he said, and I felt the word "my" like a chain. Her mother agreed. The leader tilted his head. "Then her mother can come. She's at work." He said it as if work were a shield that could be held against sunlight. A bike at the far end of the line coughed once, then went quiet again. The rider closest to me took 2 slow steps and, without crossing the gate, raised her phone so the screen reflected his face back at him. He started to say something and saw himself say it. His jaw moved. The world waited. The thing about predators is they're night animals. They hate daylight, and this afternoon was noon bright with witnesses. He tried to step off the curb and a dozen cameras leaned in the way a forest leans in the wind, not blocking, just present. Ms. Clara said my name, and it reached me like a rope. "I'm not going," I said louder. I felt my throat open like a door I'd kept locked from the inside. "I'm not getting in that car." "You'll regret this," he said, but the sentence had lost teeth. The leader drew a breath, then spoke for the entire street. "You heard her?" He didn't raise his voice. "She stays on this side of the line. You stay on yours until an officer arrives. You know how this works. There are people you can talk to. But not her." My stepfather laughed, tossed his keys in his palm like dice, and looked around for someone to agree with him. The bright afternoon returned his gaze with 1,000 lenses. Somewhere a siren started as a thin thread of sound, pulled closer by the second. He thought he could outweight the crowd. He leaned against the car and pretended boredom. The leader took a step back and joined his line. The riders didn't talk. They stood. The quiet was a type of thunder. Time opened like an accordion. I could feel each fold. A girl from my class sidled up and slipped her hand into mine without looking at me, the way you steady a person on a boat. The security guard offered Miss Clara a bottle of water and she passed it to me. I took a sip and the act felt like choosing a team. The siren became a car, the car became blue lights, the lights became 2 officers stepping out into the light. One was small and wiry, the other tall and careful. They took in the line, the cameras, the way the air had turned from oxygen into testimony. The wiry one spoke first. "Afternoon," she said, like she walked into this kind of weather all the time. "Who's Mia?" I raised my hand and lowered it because this wasn't the kind of class where you wanted to be called on. She smiled at me without showing teeth. "We heard there's a disagreement about who you're leaving with," she said, gentle like a blanket. "You can tell us what you want and we'll make sure that happens." "I want to go with Miss Clara," I said. "I want to go home with my mom later when someone else is home too." I swallowed. "I don't want to get in his car." The tall officer nodded. "All right." He turned to my stepfather. "Sir, you heard her." My stepfather spread his hands, the universal gesture of man misunderstood. I'm her legal guardian while her mother's at work. I have every right to pick her up. The wiry officer held up a clipboard app on her phone. And we have every right to ensure a minor's stated preference for safety is respected while we verify the situation, she said. We'll make some calls. She didn't add, and you will not touch her. She didn't need to. The leader didn't move, but the air around him did. I realized in that moment that some people hold their ground so quietly, the ground forgets it can do anything else. His eyes met mine, and he gave the smallest nod, like a hand clasp from across a distance. I thought we had reached the whole story. A line, a stand, a choice. But stories have basements. The first person to open the door was a woman I didn't recognize, standing behind the officers, one hand pressed to her mouth. When she lowered it, I saw a thin white scar on her upper lip like a comma, like a pause. Is that, she began, and then louder, is that Daniel Holt? My stepfather stiffened. He hated his full name in public. Do I know you? He asked, narrowing his eyes the way you do when you want a person to shrink until they disappear. You know me, she said, and then to the officers. He was asked not to come to the teen center 2 years ago. We had statements. We didn't have enough to press charges, but we warned him and we kept a list. I'm on that list. I'm on the record. Phones didn't just film now. They captured the way a lie loses mass. The officers' faces didn't change, but their posture did. Like wind-shifting directions. The riders didn't cheer. They didn't need to. I felt my heart gallop, and then it did something I hadn't felt in months. It steadied. A drumbeat synced to the quiet engines. In my head, a sentence formed with teeth and a spine. When it walked out of my mouth, it sounded like me. I'm not going, I said for the third time, counting like a proof. And I'm telling you here where everyone can hear me. He tried for one last performance. She's confused, he said. She's been influenced. Look at this. He gestured at the line. A gang. The leader lifted his chin. We're neighbors, he said. We're witnesses. We're the sound that happens when engines go quiet. He glanced at the officers. And we're staying within the law. You know the statutes as well as I do. The tall officer spoke into the radio clipped to his shoulder, listened. Then nodding once, he faced my stepfather. Sir, you're going to remain on the opposite curb while we escort Mia to a safe adult. You will not follow. You will not approach. If you do, we'll charge you with disorderly conduct and interfering with an investigation. Do you understand? For the first time since he'd arrived, my stepfather looked small in his shirt. He put his hands in his pockets and pulled them out again. He looked at the cameras and saw only himself. Whatever, he said, and the word dropped like a coin that didn't ring. The officer turned to me. Mia! I'm ready, I said. The rider nearest me stepped aside to make a passage without touching me, the way you open a curtain for light to pass through. The line adjusted, the tiniest choreography. Ms. Clara moved to my other side, a triangle of safety I could solve even without a pencil. We walked. As we passed each bike, I read names scratched into gas tanks, a rosary looped around a handlebar, a rainbow sticker half peeled but stubborn, a little plastic dinosaur zip-tied to a mirror. The world was still filming, but I wasn't a clip anymore. I was a person moving in a direction I chose. Behind us, my stepfather called my name once like it still belonged to him. The leader turned his head, just enough to let the afternoon see the line harden by a single degree. The call dissolved. It didn't land anywhere. The officers walked us to the school office, where glass turned everything into a reflection of itself. The secretary handed me a phone like it might break and said, Your mom is on the line. I pressed it to my ear and heard her inhale my name, like it had been underwater for too long. I'm coming, she said. And in the background, I heard voices, papers, the sound of a desk being shoved back. I'm not letting him, she didn't finish. She didn't have to. Come with someone, I said, and I heard a chair scrape and a man's voice say, Already here. It was her manager, the one with twin girls in the 3rd grade. He had a way of making time show up when you needed it. While we waited, the wiry officer took my statement in a room with a poster that said, Be kind, in colors that should have been louder. She didn't ask me to say what I couldn't. She asked me if I felt safe now. I said yes, and it felt like learning a new word by speaking it out loud. When Mom arrived, she had her coworker with her and a careful fire in her eyes. The leader was in the hallway, talking low to the tall officer. He stepped back as my mother passed, and he touched the brim of a cap that wasn't there. "Ma'am," he said, and the word sounded like something you might stand up straighter for. My mom's hand found mine, and all the days between the first time I knew I should hide and this door in front of me narrowed to a single bright path. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice breaking the way glass breaks when it lets light in. "I will be," I said. The future didn't feel like a cliff. It felt like a road you could take on a good engine with people riding beside you. They let us leave through the side door. The line outside still held, a quiet river of chrome under the sun. As we stepped out, helmets turned gently in our direction. Nobody cheered. A few hands lifted, palms open, a new sign language. The leader walked over and kept a respectful distance. "You won't see us unless you want to," he said. "But if you want to, you'll see us everywhere." "What do I call you?" I asked, because stories like to put names on miracles. He smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't show itself too fast. "Neighbors," he said. "You can call us neighbors." He paused. "My name is Raphael." "Thank you, Raphael," my mom said. "I don't—" She ran out of sentence. He nodded like he knew words were sometimes a luxury. "Get home," he said. "We'll be here until you're there." We climbed into my mom's co-worker's car. As we pulled away, the line shifted, a set of bikes gliding forward to form a moving buffer. The city watched. It watched us go. That night, our apartment felt like something had been moved out of it. The silence wasn't full of listening. It was just silence. My mom called my aunt, then she called a lawyer, then she called our neighbor who never sleeps before midnight and knows every building manager within 5 blocks. Doors people forget about started opening. My mom cried once, hard, then blew her nose and wrote a list. The next morning, the sun came up exactly the way it always does, like it had been practicing for this. Ms. Clara brought me a bag of muffins wrapped in foil. The tall officer left a card with numbers and a note. "Call anytime, even if it's nothing." The riders didn't return to the gate because they didn't need to. But as we walked to the bus stop, a motorcycle passed at an easy speed and the rider tapped 2 fingers to the tank, like a heartbeat I could borrow until mine remembered. At school, the hallways had a different kind of noise. Not gossip exactly. Witnesses trading notes on what sunlight does to shadows. People aren't always kind, but they love a story where the ending decides to be brave. By the end of the week, papers had been filed. The lawyer told my mom that emergency protective is a phrase that means the world can put a fence up faster than you think. My stepfather moved out of our apartment and into the kind of silence that didn't belong to him. He texted twice and then realized words stopped working when they hit a door with a lock that knows its job. Raphael stopped by the school office once with a box of helmets for the bike safety club, and he left before anyone could make a fuss. He signed the donor book as community and underlined it once. Ms. Clara circled it with a star when she thought no one was looking. I saw because I had started looking. I still count the steps to the bus stop. 22 to the corner, 5 to the crosswalk. The numbers don't keep me safe anymore. They're just numbers. But sometimes, when the street is too quiet or the wind moves in a way that remembers something I'm trying to forget, I take a breath the way Raphael took off his helmet. Slowly, with purpose. Like revealing a face to the day. In, out. Proofs are just ways to show that something has to be true. Here's mine. I am not going back to that car. If you've made it this far, you already know what I learned at the gate. Monsters hate witnesses, and courage, when it shows up with its engines off, is the loudest sound on earth. So do me a favor, if you're watching, leave a light on in your window for somebody who needs it. Tap 2 fingers to your table like a heartbeat for someone who's listening to theirs. Leave a comment for the next kid at the fence who needs to hear their name said like it belongs to them. Subscribe to the kind of neighborhood that opens its door when a siren is still far away. Because when 64 motorcycles turned off their engines in front of my school, they didn't just stop a man. They started me. Weeks later, I passed the mechanic's shop on my way to the bus, and the same 3 men were there, 2 on buckets and 1 with his hands in a good engine. The one who'd lifted his chin at me before did it again. I lifted mine back. It wasn't a secret handshake. It was a public one. Later that month, there was a safety meeting in the gym. The principal tried to make it boring. He couldn't. Parents came with clipboards and hope. Raphael stood in the back and didn't speak until the end. When he didn't talk about bikes or jackets or lines. He talked about small things, about walking kids to the corner, about knowing the names of the people who sell you bread, about noticing who looks away too quickly. He said, "Engines are loud, so we don't have to be." Afterward, the officers talked to a group of kids about how to ask for help without saying the exact words. They taught a phrase, "Can you show me where the office is?" That translates to, "I need someone to walk with me." Ms. Clara added another, "I think I left something in your classroom," which means please don't let me leave alone. We practiced. We made a joke out of it to learn it, the way you'd practice a fire drill. It wasn't funny, and it was... That's how drills work. Sometimes I still hear the car door in my sleep. But when I wake, the sound in my head changes. It becomes helmets clicking onto elbows, footsteps taking positions instead of backing away, engines going quiet in a row like a choir lowering its voices for the best part of the song. I roll onto my side and count the seconds between breaths, not because I'm hiding, but because the body loves rhythm and I keep giving it new ones. The afternoon that everything changed. I thought the twist was 64 motorcycles showing up out of nowhere like a movie. That wasn't the twist. The twist was what we decided to do with the daylight after. The twist was my mother putting her name on the line next to mine. Was a lawyer filing papers with hands that have done this before. Was a neighborhood choosing to be noisy in the ways that matter, and silent in the ways that keep a child from being stared at when she just wants to buy milk. If you're waiting for a perfect ending, I can't give you one. The world doesn't work like that. But I can give you this. A gate that still opens, a line that shows up when it's needed, a girl who calls herself by her full name when she looks in the mirror. I can give you a promise made on a public street and kept in 1,000 small rooms where doors lock from the inside and windows know how to let the air in. He said he'd pick me up from school today. He said it like a threat. I say it now like a vow. I'll pick me up. And when I do, there'll be room on the back of my voice for anyone who needs a ride. You won't believe what happens next, because it doesn't happen to me. It happens to someone else who hears this and decides that the quiet, the heavy, useful quiet, is the sound we make when we choose each other. That's the kind of ending that doesn't end.